She is mad you cut contact, yet now she's realizing you were the only one who truly cared. My beloved child, there are moments in life when silence becomes louder than any conversation, when the space between two people turns into a battlefield of memories, regrets, and realizations. Tonight, as the world grows quiet and she stares at the empty screen where your messages once appeared, she finally understands the truth she once refused to see. She is mad because you cut contact, furious because you chose distance over the chaos she kept you trapped inside, yet beneath that anger is a storm of awakening. She is realizing that every time you stayed when you should have walked away, every time you listened when she dismissed your feelings, every time you protected her heart while she neglected yours, you weren't weak, you were loyal. And loyalty, she now understands, is not something easily found again. The silence you chose was not abandonment, it was survival, and now that your presence is gone, she feels the weight of what she took for granted pressing against her chest like a truth she can no longer escape. A strange shift is happening inside her, something she never expected. The memories she once brushed aside now replay in vivid flashes. She remembers the way you stood by her when others walked out, the way you tried to understand her storms instead of running from them, the way your words carried warmth when her world felt cold. She thought you would always be there, always answering, always forgiving, always bending so she could remain unbroken. She believed you were replaceable, that affection like yours would simply reappear somewhere else. But now every conversation feels empty, every laugh with others feels hollow, and every attempt to distract herself only leads her back to the echo of your voice. The silence you left behind isn't quiet to her anymore. It speaks, it reminds, it reveals. And in that revelation, she feels something she never prepared herself for, the loss of someone who truly cared. Tonight, she replays your last words, the moment you chose distance, the moment your patience ran out. She was angry then, angry that you walked away, angry that you chose peace over the emotional maze she kept you trapped in, angry because she thought control meant connection. But now, as reality unfolds layer by layer, she begins to see that you didn't leave to hurt her, you left because you were tired of hurting yourself. She begins to realize that every boundary you tried to set was not rejection, it was a plea for respect. Every moment you withdrew was not indifference, it was exhaustion. And suddenly, it hits her, you were the only one who saw her pain and still stayed, the only one who tried to understand the darkness behind her defenses, the only one who cared enough to hold on longer than anyone else ever would. That realization shakes her to the core, because now she understands something terrifying: you cared, and she didn't know how to value it. Now, she walks through her days with a strange heaviness she cannot name. People surround her, conversations continue, life moves forward, but nothing feels the same. The world hasn't changed, she has. She begins to notice how rare your presence truly was, how deeply your care wrapped around her even when she didn't recognize it. She sees now how you were patient when she was distant, how you stayed when she pushed you away, how you loved quietly while she chased noise. And in that realization, regret grows inside her, not loud or dramatic, but deep, slow, undeniable. She understands that losing someone who truly cared is not like losing attention or admiration. It feels like losing a home you didn't know you were living in until the doors finally closed. She feels the emptiness of your absence not as silence, but as truth. And somewhere inside her heart, beneath pride and anger and denial, a voice whispers, "You were never the problem, you were the blessing she mishandled." She is mad because cutting contact forced her to face herself, because your absence revealed what your presence always protected her from seeing. But with every passing day, the anger fades and the realization grows clearer: you weren't just another person in her life, you were the only one who truly cared. And now, as she stands at the edge of a truth she can no longer outrun, she understands that some lessons arrive too late, and some people, once lost, never truly return. My beloved child, there comes a moment when the heart begins to rewind time on its own, replaying scenes you thought were forgotten, revealing truths you once ignored but can no longer outrun. Tonight, as she sits alone with the weight of her thoughts pressing against her chest, she is beginning to feel something she never imagined she would feel: the echo of your absence turning into a mirror of her mistakes. The world around her looks the same, yet everything inside her feels different, as if every memory of you has come back not to haunt her, but to awaken her. She remembers the days when she brushed off your concerns as overthinking, when she mistook your patience for weakness, when she believed your care was simply comfort she was entitled to rather than a gift she was blessed with. Now the silence she once ignored has become the loudest teacher in her life, and each passing second reminds her that what you gave came from a place of rare sincerity, a sincerity she may never find again in the same way. She tries to distract herself, tries to bury the ache beneath forced laughter and conversations that lack depth, but nothing feels real anymore. Every time someone speaks to her, she searches subconsciously for the warmth your voice carried, for the steadiness your presence provided, for the quiet understanding that lived inside your words. Yet no one speaks like you, no one listens like you, no one stays silent the way you did. Not out of indifference, but out of deep respect for her emotions. And it is only now that she sees how differently you treated her heart compared to others. They come and go, fleeting, shallow, temporary, but you stayed, even when it hurt, even when you felt unseen, even when you had to carry the weight of both hearts just to keep the connection alive. She realizes now that you were never just another person passing through her story, you were the chapter she never learned how to read properly until after it had already closed. There is a heaviness inside her that grows stronger each day, an ache that does not fade no matter how hard she pretends to be unaffected. She remembers the arguments, the misunderstandings, the moments when she chose pride over vulnerability and ego over gratitude. She remembers shutting you out when all you wanted was clarity, pushing you away when all you offered was patience, doubting you when all you gave was truth. Back then, she thought your silence meant defeat, but now she understands it was strength, the strength to walk away from a love that demanded your sacrifice without offering you safety in return. And with that understanding comes regret, not loud or dramatic, but deep, slow, painful, the kind that lingers in the quiet spaces of the soul and breathes in the shadows of memory. She watches life continue around her, people entering and leaving, conversations beginning and ending, yet nothing fills the space you left behind. She realizes that affection may be easy to find, but genuine care, the kind that sees your flaws and still chooses to stay, is irreplaceable. She looks back at every moment you stood by her side when she was drowning in her own confusion, every time you comforted her when she was lost, every time you guided her without trying to control her path. And in those memories, she finally sees the truth she had never allowed herself to accept: you didn't love her because you needed her, you loved her because you understood her. That kind of love is rare, and once lost, it leaves behind a quiet emptiness that no distraction, no new connection, no temporary presence can ever truly erase. And now, beneath all the layers of frustration, anger, and unspoken emotion, she begins to realize something she never expected. She was never angry because you left, she was angry because your absence revealed everything she refused to see while you were still there. You were the one who stood firmly when others faded away. You were the one who cared even when you had every reason to stop. You were the one who chose honesty over convenience, loyalty over distance, love over pride. And as this realization finally settles into her heart, she feels the weight of what she lost, not just a person, but the only one who truly cared, the one she never thought she would have to live without. My beloved child, time has a way of revealing truths that the heart tries to avoid, and now, as the days stretch into long, quiet nights, she begins to understand the reality she once refused to face. The anger she carried toward you is no longer rage, it has turned into a heavy silence, a realization pressing against her chest like a weight she cannot lift. She remembers the way you spoke gently even when you were hurting, the way you held back your own tears just to reassure her that everything would be okay, the way you chose compassion instead of confrontation when the situation demanded understanding instead of conflict. She used to think your calm nature meant you didn't care enough, but now she sees the truth. Your calmness was strength, your silence was protection, your patience was love in its purest form. And now, as she stands alone with her thoughts echoing through the emptiness you left behind, she realizes that losing someone who truly cared is not just losing a person, it is losing the safe place where her soul once rested. She replays the moments when you tried to express your pain but softened your words so they wouldn't hurt her, when you hid your own struggles so she wouldn't feel burdened, when you smiled through your own heartbreak just to keep her world steady. Back then, she called you distant, now she calls you selfless. Back then, she called your boundaries abandonment, now she calls them courage. She didn't understand that sometimes love means stepping away from the fire, even when your heart is still inside it. Your withdrawal wasn't coldness, it was survival, a last attempt to protect what was left of your spirit before it broke completely. And now, with every memory that resurfaces, she begins to realize that what she mistook as detachment was actually the final strength of a heart that had given everything it possibly could. There are moments when she reaches for her phone, her fingers hovering over your name, her heart torn between pride and longing. She wants to say something, anything, to bridge the distance that now feels wider than oceans, yet every word she thinks of feels too small, too late, too fragile to hold the weight of her regret. She wonders if you still think of her, if you still remember the late-night conversations, the emotional confessions, the laughter that once felt unbreakable. But then she remembers, you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because caring for her meant losing yourself, and for the first time, she understands the cost of that sacrifice. She realizes that love without respect becomes a burden, and affection without appreciation becomes a wound that never heals until distance finally forces the truth to surface. Now, she notices the emptiness in places where you once existed, the quiet moments where your presence once brought comfort, the familiar spaces where your words once filled the air with reassurance. Others speak to her, but their voices don't reach the same depth. Others show interest, but their presence doesn't feel safe. She begins to see that connection is easy, but genuine care is rare. You did not love her because you wanted to win. You loved her because you wanted to understand. You did not stay because you were afraid to leave, you stayed because your heart believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. And that realization strikes her with a truth she cannot deny: you were never just someone in her life, you were the proof that real love still exists, even if it arrives only once. And now, beneath the layers of regret, reflection, and unspoken longing, she finally accepts what she once tried to ignore: you were the only one who truly cared, not because you were perfect, but because you were genuine. She is no longer angry at your silence, she is heartbroken by what it taught her. Your absence has become the greatest lesson of her life, a reminder that real love does not shout, it does not demand, it does not control, it stands quietly, gives endlessly, stays faithfully, until the day it can no longer survive in a place where it is unseen. And as she stands in the middle of that truth, she realizes that some people are not meant to be replaced, not meant to be forgotten, not meant to be taken for granted, because their presence was a blessing, and losing them becomes a wound the heart carries forever. My beloved child, as the night deepens and quiet truths begin to rise from the corners of her heart, she finally reaches the point where denial can no longer protect her. The illusions she once wrapped herself in have faded, and all that remains is the sharp clarity of everything she never acknowledged when you were still there. She walks through memories like fragile rooms filled with echoes of your voice, the gentle reassurance you gave when she doubted herself, the silent strength you carried when she felt lost, the unwavering loyalty that stayed even when the world around her felt uncertain. Back then, she mistook your presence for permanence. She thought you would always return, no matter how many times she pushed you away. But now, as she stands alone in the quiet reality of your absence, she realizes that loyalty is not infinite, it is a gift, and once broken, it leaves behind a silence that cannot be undone. She begins to understand how much you sacrificed without ever demanding recognition, how often you chose kindness when you had every reason to walk away, how deeply you cared even when your own heart was exhausted. She remembers the nights when your words steadied her even while you were hurting, the days when you showed up for her despite carrying your own invisible weight. She sees now that you never asked her to be perfect, you only wanted effort, honesty, understanding. But instead of meeting you halfway, she mistook your consistency for convenience, your patience for obligation, your love for something that could survive without being nurtured. And now, as regret sinks deeper into her soul, she realizes that the person she doubted was the very one who always believed in her, even when she could not believe in herself. There is a new kind of silence in her life now, not empty, but reflective. She replays every conversation, every moment where you tried to communicate your pain but softened your voice to protect her feelings. She remembers the instant when your tone finally changed, when the exhaustion beneath your kindness became visible, when your heart reached its final threshold. That was the turning point she never noticed, the moment your spirit began to withdraw quietly, not out of rejection, but out of necessity. She sees now that love can only survive where it is valued, and care can only continue where it is reciprocated. You did not disappear because you wanted to, you left because staying meant abandoning yourself. And for the first time, she respects that decision, even though it hurts more than anything she has ever felt. She carries your presence now not in conversations or messages, but in lessons, in the understanding of what real care truly looks like. She notices how others around her lack the depth you once offered so effortlessly. Their words feel temporary, their intentions unsteady, their commitment fragile. And in each new interaction, she is reminded of the difference between being liked and being valued, between being admired and being understood. You did not just care for her, you stood by her, you protected her, you believed in her growth when she could not see it herself. That kind of love doesn't just leave a memory, it leaves a mark, one that reshapes the way the heart views connection forever. And now, beneath the layers of realization and unspoken emotion, she finally accepts the truth her pride once refused to admit. You were never the one who failed her, she failed to recognize the treasure standing in front of her. The anger she once felt toward your silence has turned into a quiet longing for the version of you that stayed longer than anyone else ever would. She understands now that you were not just someone who passed through her life, you were the one who truly cared, the one who gave love without conditions, the one she never imagined losing until it was already too late. And as she stands in the echo of your absence, her heart whispers the truth she can no longer deny. Losing you was not just losing a person, it was losing the only soul who ever cared with a depth she may never find again. My beloved child, there comes a final moment in every journey where the heart stops running from the truth and begins to breathe in the weight of everything it has lost, everything it misunderstood, everything it realized only when it was gone. Tonight, as she stands at the quiet edge of her own reflection, she feels the full gravity of your absence settle into the deepest parts of her soul. The anger that once fueled her pride has dissolved into a soft, aching sincerity, and the walls she once built to protect herself have now become reminders of the love she pushed away. She begins to see the story not from the lens of her emotions, but from the sacrifices you carried in silence. The nights you stayed awake comforting her while your own heart was breaking, the moments you swallowed your pain just so she wouldn't feel alone, the countless times you chose to stay when walking away would have been easier. And now, as the truth unfolds inside her with a quiet, humbling force, she realizes that the pain she feels is not just regret, it is the awakening of a heart that finally understands what it means to be loved by someone who truly cared. She remembers the way you used to speak with a softness that didn't demand attention but earned it, the way your presence never overshadowed her but instead held space for her fears, her doubts, her vulnerability. Back then, she mistook your gentleness for simplicity, your silence for indifference, your patience for predictability. She never realized that your love was not loud because it did not need to prove itself, that your loyalty was not dramatic because it was rooted in sincerity, that your heart did not chase chaos because it only knew how to give peace. And now, standing in the aftermath of everything, she understands that the world is full of people who can show excitement, interest, fascination, but very few who can offer stability, safety, and truth the way you did. She sees now that while others admired her, you understood her. While others wanted her presence, you wanted her well-being. While others offered moments, you offered consistency. And that is the difference she only learned after losing you. She walks through her days now with a quiet reverence for the version of you that once existed in her life, the version that stayed longer than it should have, loved deeper than it was acknowledged, and carried more than it ever received. She realizes that your departure was not an act of abandonment, but a final act of self-respect, a moment where you chose to protect the last unbroken part of yourself. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She began to understand that real love does not thrive where it is overlooked, real loyalty does not survive where it is taken for granted, and real care cannot remain in a place where it is misunderstood. She sees now that you did not walk away because you lacked love, you walked away because you had finally run out of pieces of yourself to lose. And with that realization, she feels a quiet ache that stretches beyond regret. It becomes wisdom, the kind that arrives too late but changes the heart forever. Now, when she looks at the world around her, she feels the contrast clearer than ever. People come into her life with excitement, promises, and intentions wrapped in glittering words, but none carry the depth your silence once held, none reflect the steadiness your presence once provided, none make her feel seen the way your understanding once did. She notices how temporary everything feels without you, how conversations lack meaning, how affection lacks foundation. And in every fleeting moment, she is reminded of the way you stood by her without conditions, how you chose empathy instead of ego, how you gave without expectation. You were not just someone who loved her, you were the rare soul who honored her emotions even when yours were breaking. And now, as she stands in the echo of that truth, she realizes that what she lost was not merely a connection, it was a once-in-a-lifetime presence. And at last, beneath the quiet surrender of acceptance, she finally whispers the truth her heart can no longer hide. You were the one who truly cared, the one who loved her with a depth she never understood until it was gone, the one whose absence now stands as the greatest turning point of her life. She may move forward, she may grow, she may change, but a part of her will always carry the memory of you, not as a mistake, not as a regret, but as a reminder of what real love looks like when it lives in the hands of someone who gives everything and asks for nothing in return. And in that silent realization, she understands that losing you was not the end of a story, it was the moment her heart finally awakened to the truth that some souls are not meant to be forgotten, because they were the only ones who truly cared.